And it goes against the prevailing moral authorities, then they will penalize you. And it doesn't really matter about your arguments to prove to others that why you want to follow your conscience is better than following external moral authorities which you disagree with. You will still get penalized. And so you have to think about this. Now, sometimes you will not get penalized, but you may be afraid of getting penalized because this is part of the process of sort of induction that you get throughout your whole life into the prevailing social attitudes, the prevailing ideas about what's right and wrong. You will find that there are times when you go against your conscience. And when you go against your conscience, why would you do that? Partly it may be to avoid getting penalized, whether you will actually get penalized or whether you are afraid of getting penalized, but you may go against your conscience for either of those reasons. You may go against your conscience because actually the law of the country in which you live has laws which are enforceable by the authorities, but which nevertheless you don't agree with because they go against your conscience. And so you will definitely get penalized in that situation. And then there are other situations where you will go against your conscience because you feel like you're the only one who thinks that particular way, and everyone else thinks another way, and you will go against your conscience in order to be included, in order not to be ostracized or excluded or marginalized. And very often you will go against your conscience because you're not quite sure, because there's been so many messages telling you that you're not right and that they are right. But then there are other types of situations where you will go against your conscience in order to look good. You will go against your conscience because if you go according to your conscience, then it will put you in a very different types of very awkward situations. And every time you go against your conscience, sometimes you may even not follow the voice of conscience in order not to disturb someone or distress them or hurt their feelings, because if you say what you really think, they really wouldn't like it, and you would feel upset because they didn't like it. There are many, many things involved in intimate personal relationships, family relationships, work relationships. It happens very often in the context of work. Because your employer has maybe a different value system from you. You're working in a business and they want to make a maximum amount of money. They may want to cut corners. They may want to forget about health and safety. They may want to be dishonest. And if you don't go along with it, you will lose your job. And if you lose your job, you cannot pay your bills. And so sometimes, because of being financially dependent, you may go against your conscience, but you will not feel good. Now, when you are an idealist, you're always in a terrible situation because most things are against your conscience. So you have to be a realist, and you have to create certain criteria because there are things which are more important, less important. There's a whole spectrum, a whole way of deciding for yourself what your red lines are, what your limits and boundaries are, what you will do, what you won't do, regardless of the cost. And this is individual. But there is another thing that I would say about conscience, which is really quite interesting, and that is that every time you go against your conscience, it loses functionality. And this is something I think very few people realize or have even heard about. But it is something that I have discovered, because when a person is engaged in spiritual practice, there's a great deal of self-evaluation that goes on. And I have been doing this for many, many years, most of my life. So if your conscience loses functionality, then you can no longer rely on the voice of conscience to guide you. When you follow the voice of conscience always or almost always, while being realistic, it remains a very reliable guide to help you get through your decisions, your relationships, how you navigate yourself through the many, many challenges of life in the world today. But if you very often go against your conscience and you knowingly and consciously put aside your values and put aside what you stand for, after a little while, you will start believing the lies, the things that you don't stand for. You will start standing for those, and your conscience will say goodbye to you. And then you're on your own. And in that kind of a situation, you have to rely upon the evaluations and judgments of external moral authorities. And what I have found is external moral authorities generally advise people according to what they think is best for you, as long as it's convenient for them, or they may advise you according to what is just convenient for them, regardless of you. But generally speaking, you are going to be much more for in your own interests than an external moral authority. So what I mean to say by this is that if you go against your conscience, you lose a great deal more than you realize in the initial stages. And by the time you've gone a long way down that road and your conscience has sort of vanished from your internal landscape, you basically lose your way and you end up in a space, in a situation which you would never have got into had you stuck with the voice of conscience. So, I mean, I made it a personal policy that I will do that because I have to live with myself forever. And other people, they come and go. They may approve, disapprove, like, not like, whatever. But, you know, if I am true to myself, that's a whole lot better. Because, you know, when you think about consciousness, then you're thinking about the human spirit, the human soul, and that is a forever. That is you for all time. You have to live with yourself from now until eternity. A lot of people don't really think about it that way because people think, well, death is a final thing, and after death, that's it, really. We do live in a materialistic world. And so, corresponding to that, a lot of people will establish their personal ethical policy according to a materialistic approach to success in life, honor in life, being recognized, and so on. And then you see, if you look at it from a different angle, which may be not according to the prevailing atmosphere, the prevailing social attitudes, and you do everything according to your inner world, then your inner compass, your conscience, is the one that you follow. And it will take you definitely to the right place, but there is a cost. And so then we have to have a look at the cost. What is the cost? It may be you are marginalized. It may be you are described as not playing the game. You are described as someone who is messing things up. You will have to handle the reality of being by yourself, and you will have to deal with that. So you must look inside yourself and see what kind of strength you have. In a way, a person who follows the voice of conscience has a great deal of personal strength, personal courage, personal resilience, but you don't get born necessarily with that. It's acquired. And it's something that you acquire as you proceed through your life by following the voice of conscience. And that means that there are many things that will happen to you that are painful. And so you need to handle that painfulness. You need to be able to endure being marginalized. You need to have a great deal of faith in yourself because your stance is maybe not convenient for the people who want to, in a sense, use you for their own aims and objectives. And you will be a standalone person. And so that means you need to be strong. But what it also means is that every time you take a position based on your understanding of what's real, what's truth, what's correct, and that you will not cross certain red lines, it does make you into a really very highly honorable, noble person. And then after a little while, or maybe after a long while, you find that those people who were not so kind to you eventually come back, and they really do honor your ability to retain your sense of being true to yourself, to retain your honor, your fidelity to your own value systems, and they recognize you as a leader. And this is definitely a characteristic of a powerful leader. And so I think there's a great connection between someone who follows that inner compass of the voice of conscience and is with you at all times. You who follow the voice of conscience and you're connected with yourself really well, you are a leader, and people will follow you. You don't have to try to be a leader, but sometimes this question of following the voice of conscience is a test from the external people around you or authorities around you to find out what you're made of, what is your metal, and they will see that you are made of really solid stuff, and so therefore they can trust you. And actually, in the world today, it's really quite difficult to find anyone who is really trustworthy. So a trustworthy person follows the voice of conscience, or a person who follows the voice of conscience becomes recognized as a trustworthy, solid person that that they can rely on. You see, and so I would say that this is a very, very important, powerful indicator of what kind of a being you are. I think it's also very interesting, at least in the way I work on myself and think about my own personal development. If there may be many kinds of pressure that may be put on me. You have to do like this, you can't do like that. If you follow the voice of conscience, there's going to be this thing, that thing, the other thing, that's going to happen to you, and you have to pass those tests. They are tests. And in a way, we say life is a university, and I will take whatever test comes my way, and I will, I will not betray myself. I think that's really quite an important thing. I mean, you don't like it if someone betrays you, obviously. You feel really bad when you're betrayed. But if you will not betray yourself, I think you will also not betray anyone else. And if someone does betray you, because you're clean and clear and absolutely in line with your conscience, I think the strength that it brings you enables you to handle being betrayed. Because you can't really expect life to be good to you at all times. There are many, many occasions where you will get betrayed. And so if you can handle being betrayed, again, that is a sign of what kind of person you are, that you can get through it and that you will maintain your integrity regardless. And there you begin to act in the way that a person of greatness acts, which means that the way you live your life, even if it's not very well known to many people, even if it's just within a small circle, but it doesn't change the fact that you are operating as a person of greatness, as a person of nobility. And I think that it's not just our interaction with people that's at stake here, but it's also, a person who has or gives a very great importance to the inner life. That person also is dealing with the higher power, is dealing with God, is dealing with the supreme intelligence. And so that means that you're aware that you are constantly being assessed and evaluated, so that if you are looking at yourself in not only in terms of how people are looking at you, but in terms of how the divine is looking at you, this also, I think, gives another layer of something very significant to who you are. Because why do you do what you do? This is a very important question. Why? What are you motivated by? And so different people are motivated by different things. But I think a person who follows the voice of conscience is motivated by truth, and motivated by that they want to be true to themselves, but also they live by truth as best as they can. And the divine is also called truth. So if you live by truth, you will be in the eyes of the divine, you can say. And so what that means is it makes a difference to the circumstances that you encounter. Some of the circumstances will be heavy tests because, the divine will test you much more strongly than other human beings. And so you need to understand that. But if you show yourself to be real and honorable and trustworthy, and that you will not betray yourself or anyone else, then circumstances will open up for you to be able to act in a way that gives you the opportunity to do a lot of benefit for a lot of people. And this means that your karma, the quality of your karma, and the consequences of your karma are really quite enormous. And you find yourself moving to a stage which we could say that's success. Of course, different people have different definitions of success. A materialistic person will call success if they have a lot of money and power and influence, and that they can control many people and circumstances and so on. But a person who is motivated by something like truth or something like integrity or honor, to that person, success is much more subtle. And if you have an idea that such and such a situation would be very, very good for you, for your country, for the people, for the world, and that you want that to happen, well, when you are a person who follows the conscience, who lives as close as possible by truth, you will find yourself in situations where those opportunities are there, and that you make a difference in a really good way, which leaves a very powerful imprint, maybe for a very long period of time. And even if you may be marginalized or discredited, or even character assassination can happen. But after some time, that part falls away, and the reality of who you are and what you're made of comes through. Even if it comes through after your death, it still comes through. And a person who is concerned about the inner workings of consciousness also are aware of the continuity of the soul, the immortality of the soul, that you are part and parcel of whatever's happening in the distant future, and that there is a part of you that comes from the ancient past. And so you're a person who actually really thinks about, benefit of humanity. You're not just thinking of yourself in a little way, or in a little bubble. Even though you may be physically in a little bubble, but your mind is wide and broad, and your purpose is big. And even if it's just in your mind, but all of these things come together. And as you progress, I do think the matter of being close to your conscience intensifies and increases. One of the questions connected with this topic is, how do we enable ourselves to get closer, or the inner ear, to listen more closely to the voice of conscience? And this is it, really, that as you continue to give importance to your conscience, and it continues to let you know what a good and reliable guide it is, and you continue to find circumstances, maybe trials, maybe challenging, but ultimately circumstances do reflect back to you that this is the really good, empowering, noble way to live, and it makes you feel very good about yourself. I mean, you don't have any regrets or shame. You have a clear conscience, and that means that your vision, your perception of things, the way things are going, what should be happening, and you can make a difference. So all of these things, they add up, and you begin to feel that your purpose in life is very purposeful. Many people, they wonder, what is my purpose? And they don't really get much of an answer. But I think a person who follows the voice of conscience, the conscience will also indicate to you what is a purposeful life. And as you read the circumstances that surround you moment by moment, you will get, I think, like highlighted instances which let you know that, yeah, if you go this way, this is a very purposeful thing to do. This will correspond to who you are in a more concrete way, and that you will be you'll be glad that you are you. And in fact, this is a very amazing experience to have, which I think a person who does practice spirituality does arrive at this experience sooner or later, which is that the very best thing that there is that I am me. Because you can actually be proud of yourself, not in an arrogant way, but proud of yourself that, if I would die now, there's nothing to regret. There's nothing to fix. While we are constantly working on ourselves, while we are also dealing with the slings and arrows that life sends our way, but the way that we deal with them, when you listen to the voice of conscience, always at the end of that, you say, yeah, that was the right thing to do. I was able to do the right thing, and that makes me feel good about myself. And feeling good about yourself means that you don't need anyone else to tell you that you're good, or look for approval, because you are the one who approves yourself because of your relationship with your conscience. And as I said before, a relationship with your conscience opens up the doorway to a relationship with the divine, because if you go against your conscience, it definitely closes those doors, and you just remain on a very mundane type of life. But I think a mundane type of life is not very satisfying. Although our life is externally quite mundane, quite ordinary, but on the inside, there is something very high quality, but it's not necessarily revealed to other people, because your relationship with your consciences is just you and you. It's not you and anybody else. Or maybe you will say it's myself and the divine. And the divine will say, okay, but that's you and you also. Because you stand for yourself, and you stand in the light and the love of the divine. You definitely receive some kind of signals and signs that you're on the right track from an external but very subtle source. If you're looking for external approval from people who don't follow their conscience, then you're really compromising yourself. And so you wouldn't feel comfortable doing that at all. Sometimes people think when a person is a small child that they don't get born with a conscience, and that the external moral authorities have to make the child morally conscious. But I don't agree with that. At least in my personal experience, I've always felt that the conscience has been there right from the beginning. And I never allowed the external authorities to interfere with my relationship with myself, or my relationship with my conscience. And I think that that was a very good thing to have done. I gave much more importance to what I thought about myself than what other people thought about me. And I think that that has stood me in good stead. Because other people, they see what they see, but they don't see everything. And when you're working with your conscience, you take into consideration all things, the seen and the unseen. But external moral authorities can only see what they see, which is maybe a small percentage of what is there. And so that also disqualifies them from being your judge. But you see everything from the inside. Your conscience lets you know the second you do something that's not right, even before you actually do it. So this is how it guides you. It's a very, very subtle indication, which is why it's so important to follow it, because when you don't follow it, you become gross, and you cannot pick up the subtle signs that it gives you. And so one has to realize how delicate a mechanism human consciousness is. And I think mostly people just don't, and it gets, in a sense, trashed and stomped on, and damaged, very much damaged. So in some ways, another very interesting aspect about the matter of conscience and following your conscience is that you're repairing it. Because when we arrive in this world, for those who believe in a continuity of life in the past and in the future, you don't come like a blank piece of paper. You come from somewhere. You come from past experience, past lives, and so on. And everyone has experienced all sorts of damage, trauma, shock, this and that. And so there is an aspect of repairing of the self that's also connected with conscience. Because one of the reasons why a person would not easily be able to follow the voice of conscience is because of some scars from some past bad experiences, maybe in this life, maybe in another life. But these play a role in interfering with your relationship with your conscience. And so when you sit with your conscience and really work to have a good relationship with your conscience and listen carefully, it does repair a lot of the damage that happened through different traumas, childhood trauma, past life trauma, all sorts of things that happen to people. The world at the moment is a very difficult place to be in, to get born in, to grow up in. And so we have to be a little bit merciful towards ourselves, compassionate towards ourselves, not too harsh on the self. Life is harsh enough as it is. And so we have to love the self and treat the self gently, because the self, the consciousness, is a delicate, extraordinary instrument which is eternal and immortal, no doubt, but which can also get badly damaged and needs to be cared for. And if it's damaged, then to be repaired. And this is where meditation comes into the picture. And I will be doing an example of a few minutes of meditation for you in just a moment. But the wonderful thing about meditation and conscience is that it has this repairing or restorative quality about it. Why? Because meditation is to tune your mind with the being of the Supreme Being, to tune your mind with the mind of the divine. And this creates an extraordinary resonance which has a healing aspect. And you draw spiritual energy into yourself, which is pure, clean, very beautiful, a very healing, delicate, harmonizing type of resonance. And this plays a very, very big role in the work of restoring your relationship with your conscience. And maybe if you are somebody who hasn't followed the voice of conscience and you have felt the consequences of that, and you want to bring yourself back into good relationship with your conscience, then meditation helps an enormous amount. So let's just take a moment and turn the attention within and just allow the mundane things of the day to fall away for a moment as you turn within and be with your essential self. Go to the deep part of your being, the quiet, bright spark of consciousness that you are. Tune with that bright, still, almost intangible being that you are. The powerful one. You are a power. You are a being of light that is forever. And as you get connected, you feel the energy reaching you. the energy that harmonizes all the parts of your being, gently tuning you to the higher supreme being beyond. You feel something happening to you. Very gentle, very sweet. A resonance that corresponds with who you really are. It makes you feel empowered. This power beyond is always with you. And it is your conscience that lets you know this is the one. This is the higher being that is your guide. And that works with your conscience. To give you ever greater clarity. Thank you. So there it is.
Oh, that was a beautiful meditation. I didn't want to come away from that. Thank you so much, Denise. It was such a rich talk. I'm kind of buzzing around. I'm just going to pick out a few things and then ask you a couple of things. Let's see what we've got time for.
Right.
The things that really struck me is, I mean, lots and lots of things, but this thing about functionality. Yes. I mean, it's obvious in a way, if you think about it, that if you don't use your conscience, if you go against your conscience, rather, it's going to lose something. It's going to lose its strength, isn't it? And together with that, how delicate the conscience is, that it's easily damaged and maybe not easily repaired either. Although you talked about repairing, I think later on, didn't you? Repairing in the sense of coming into this life with or having those traumas or experiences that need repairing. And
no, the conscience itself needs repairing because it stops working. And when something stops working, it means in some ways it's broken. It's not just that it's gone on strike, which it does, but it also gets damaged.
There's an expression, killing your conscience. Can you actually kill it? Kill it as in finally kill it, or can you only damage it or reduce it?
Well, the expression is kill the conscience, and that means you do something so terribly against your conscience that you have effectively destroyed its ability to talk to you anymore. You closed it down, put it into a coma, and then you can do diabolical things. And there are people who do diabolical things having killed their conscience.
Yes.
I mean, we see it around us at the moment. The world is in a very, very unsettled space. And people are afraid because of that, because it's getting too close. There's things happening that are so out of the ordinary and that are so close that it's scary for people. And that's troubling.
That comes from people who are psychopaths, isn't it? And also sociopaths to a lesser degree as well, that they don't appear to have a conscience. They don't appear to feel the effect of what they do on other people.
Yeah, sociopath is much worse than psychopath.
Yeah.
And yes, it's definitely killed conscience and definitely very bad for the world, very bad for themselves. But there's a lot of that around.
Going back to your earlier point connected with
Yeah.
that is, how do you repair it? If it's
To
very
me,
damaged, well, degrees of damage might be a point, but how do you repair it?
I think one of the ways that it gets damaged such that you can repair it is that different types of abuse that a person is subjected to just totally wrecks their moral compass. And then they lose the ability, but it's coming not from themselves, it's coming from an external source. And so once you start to listen to the voice of conscience, it can repair itself quite readily, because your wish is to be true to yourself. Some people, when they've lost that wish and they don't care and they just want to be diabolical, then they will be that. But if they don't want to be damaged, then they're always yearning to be back to normal, you can say, or back to their essential self. And then I think when they get any encouragement or possibility to start really listening to the conscience, it wakes up, it starts repairing quite quickly.
Oh, really? Oh, that's very hard. Have you ever known anybody like that personally?
Yeah, yes, I have. Part of my work is to work closely with people, some of whom have been quite damaged. And when you're helping a person along in their spiritual practice, then these kinds of things do come into the conversation, and they take the form of obstacles in a person's spiritual practice. So then they need to have some ideas about how to deal with it. And so I do come across this, and I have, my experience shows me that you can really enable a person to get back on track quite well, by connecting them with their heart.
Mm, mm,
The heart is true, the conscience is true, clean, all these things. These are part of a repaired soul.
yeah,
But when a person really doesn't want to be, then you have to wait until they do want to be.
yeah, yes.
Mm.
And they may not.
They may not.
Yeah,
Exactly.
in this birth anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you ever yourself gone against your conscience in a?
Well, I think everybody has. And when you go against your conscience, it will really let you know that you did that, because you do it so rarely or under certain very trying circumstances, and you won't forget it. And then you will start to repair it. But I think anyone who's listening to this, with a sense of really looking inside themselves, you will know. And in spiritual practice, there's a lot of self-checking goes on. And if you are a person who does this, I mean, there may be some circumstance which is sort of too high speed or something, you make a mistake. It won't be that you deliberately do something wrong, but you make a mistake easily enough and you react, or there's a karmic account to settle, or something like this, which will be a circumstance in which you will do something that, if all is well, you wouldn't do. And then that'll be on your conscience, you see. A person
Yeah,
who goes against their conscience all the time, nothing left on their conscience, is overloaded, collapses. And so,
yeah,
but if you've got one thing on your conscience, you really want to deal with it, and because
yes,
you want to have a clean, clear conscience.
yeah, yeah. It's painful, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
It is said conscience bites.
Oh, yes, so it does. Conscience bites. Last question. You talked about, that was interesting, about leading a purposeful life. And
Yeah.
sometimes if you have that clean, clear conscience, you get a strong indication. Can you give us one example where you've had that strong indication?
The way I look at it is like this, that there's a connection between a person who wants to have a clean, clear conscience and having a purposeful life. You see, they go together. If you have a purposeful life, or you're thinking about your purpose, immediately it'll bring you together with your conscience, and your conscience will say, okay, you want a purposeful life, you better take me with you, because otherwise your life will be meaningless. You see what I'm saying? So that there are things that are hand in glove. And clean, clear conscience and purposeful life means you operate greater than just immediately satisfying your basic animal needs. You want to have a higher purpose, if you will. Yes. And so there are many things that are important to you that are nothing to do with your personal needs getting fulfilled or your personal desires. That's too small for you, you see. It doesn't have enough meaning.
We've got quite a lot of examples. I mean, a lot of examples around us and for ourselves, but in history, there's been quite a few people like that.
That's how they got into history. I mean, we're all going through history, but who gets noted? Yeah. Because this is where it's connected with greatness, you see. And somebody who is evaluated as great after they're dead, they go in the history books sooner or later. Yeah. Sometimes later, but they say, you know, let history be your judge.
Yeah. Because holding that really fully is challenging for most people.
Well, you have to be brave.
Yeah.
Because there's a cost.
Thank
but
you.
But you're
so
rich,
much.
You can pay it.
If you're rich, you can pay it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
great.